Welcome, everyone. I am just delighted that you have joined us for today's MTI Research Snaps webinar, Safeguarding Travel, Transportation's Fight Against Human Trafficking. My name is Dr. Hillary Nixon, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of the Moneta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. I apologize for my voice. I have a bit of a cold I'm recovering from, but I promise you only hear me for the introduction, and then we'll get to our wonderful group of speakers. MTI is a university transportation center that leads 3 competitively selected multi-university consortia that focuses on improving the mobility of people and goods. MTI's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving the safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation system. We accomplish this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. Before we launch into our webinar today, I just wanted to extend a really sincere thank you to WTS San Francisco for co-sponsoring this event. In today's webinar, we're going to hear about how to fight back against human trafficking, a form of modern slavery that traps 49.6 million individuals around the globe. Our nation's transportation systems are being used by traffickers, and today we will discuss how to fight back with the latest research, training methods, and perspectives from the anti-trafficking front lines. Our speakers today are Christy Weigel, Dr. Kezban Yagi-Sukat, and Evelyn Chumbow. Christy Weigel is co-founder and CEO of United Against Slavery. She's worked on the front lines of anti-trafficking work for more than 13 years. She developed the National Outreach Survey, a tool designed to collect and spread comprehensive frontline data on all types of trafficking to inform research and programming. Next, Dr. Kezban Yagi-Sukat is an MTI research associate and an associate professor of business analytics at San Jose State University. Her research focuses on using mathematical modeling and decision analytics to alleviate human suffering. Finally, Evelyn Chumbow is a survivor advocate and the operations manager at Human Trafficking Legal Center. She was appointed by President Obama to serve on the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. Christy, Kezban, and Evelyn, welcome. We are recording this webinar, and the link to view will be available shortly on our website and social media pages. We'll first hear from Christy and Kezban through a joint presentation, and then we'll hear from Evelyn. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to be here today and to listen to my hoarse voice for a couple minutes. I now turn the floor over to Kezban and Christy.
All right. Well, it's certainly an honor to be here today, and what a tremendous opportunity it is to share with some of my colleagues again about something that I am passionate about. We all are, which is combating human trafficking, especially within the transportation space. As Hillary mentioned, I've been in the anti-trafficking space now for over 15 years and continue to work with sex and labor trafficking survivors with long-term advocacy. And one of the things that any of us find out is in dealing with anti-trafficking work, transportation is at the central force of certainly how victims and survivors can be recognized to help escape their abuse, but also in the transition for their healing. I will tell you, in the space of me starting out my anti-trafficking, I co-founded a local anti-trafficking organization that provided direct victim care, emergency care, collaboration with multidisciplinary stakeholders. And through the work of all of that, notice that there are many, many unresolved challenges that impact and slow down progress in counter-trafficking measures. And one of the things that I did was I created a national outreach survey that would allow us to go to the front lines to find out what is and is not working, to go to the people that are doing the work and to see what challenges may exist in specific stakeholder groups, how those challenges may vary across interdisciplinary teams, and then if those challenges may vary depending on the geographical locations where those stakeholders may work. At the end, the focus of everything that we do at United Against Slavery is focusing on the victims and survivors. And to do that, we've got to look at what's working and what's not working among the frontline workers. And so I created the National Outreach Survey for Transportation as a conduit to really reach all modes of transportation. This was under a impact award through the US DOT. We had additional sponsors that contributed funding, especially for the survivor participation with that. I know our time is limited today, but I would invite anyone to go to our website, unitedagainstslavery.org. You can click on download any of the reports, the supporting tools, individual chapters. It was a very comprehensive study that we did. And again, as you see on here, it was comprehensive. And we had a massive team that contributed, including Kesben and Hillary and so many others. And again, we can all bring the best of who we are. None of us have all of the answers. And the whole point of this survey was to identify what is and isn't working on the front lines and to be able to utilize that research to see where improvements needed to be made. In the focus of transportation, the respondent pool that we were targeting were transportation personnel. If we can go back real quick, Kesben, and I'll just finish that one part. The transportation personnel across all modes of transportation, the victim service providers, trafficking survivors, including all genders, races, identities. And throughout everything that we do at UAS, we are always and will continue to be survivor and trauma informed throughout the entire project. Okay. So we had to develop a methodology for frontline workers with our research that we were doing to reach those different modes of transportation. We ended up with 3,896 survey respondents across the NOS, the National Outreach Survey for Transportation. There were several considerations that we did when we were initially developing that methodology. Again, to target so many different modes of transportations with different agencies that are in there. And in order to do that, as mentioned, we had more than 120 collaborations across transportation sectors, across universities. We had 5 different state DOTs that were participating there. Within the advisory, within the model, the collaborative research model. And I will say this, I developed the collaborative research model partly because I am passionate about collaboration. And having worked in the space for more than 15 years and collaborated with colleagues across more than 20 countries, we all have a voice. We all have something that we can add. And so within our collaborative research model, we had different advisory groups that contributed to the NOS study. And we had our SLAC team, which was a survivor-led team of all forms of human trafficking, different genders. We wanted it to be diverse so we could have all the voices that were representing in the specifics of what we were trying to accomplish within transportation and counter trafficking. As mentioned, we had university transportation centers, lived experience experts, field experts, academics. As you can see, and I'll just touch briefly because I know that we want to spend time for the data that's actually been collected here. And I will tell you, part of, again, my passion for combating one of the largest criminal activities in the world, we've always got to have collaboration at the focus. And one of the things I truly appreciated as the principal investigator and the CEO of United Against Slavery, but in creating this whole focus and bringing so many people in, it was important for us to get feedback from those participating and hearing from those that said, you know what, there's so many opportunities out there for research and collaboration, but seeing this project literally brought together so many individuals and institutions that might not have otherwise worked together. And so go ahead, Kesben. And so as we were looking at within that respondent pool of 3,896 respondents, 96% of those were within the United States. And I don't know if the presentation will be made available afterwards, but you can see the level of participation that's on there. Again, you can see California, Missouri, Nevada, Texas, and Georgia. And already getting feedback, which Kesvin's going to speak on some of the data, but already getting feedback across those that participated, including MoDOT, how they've been able to use our data to apply for funding based upon some of the data for rest areas and needing extended lighting and things like that. And so I think having a good foundation and understanding what we're doing, the importance of what we're doing. I will say that, transportation is used throughout all aspects of when a victim is victimized, and even when they're in their survivor journey, short-term, long-term. And the data that we've collected, the data that Kesvin's about to share, so important to help have a role in that. And so, Kesvin, if you want to go ahead and share some of that data, thank you so much.
Hi all, I will just, scrape the surface for this. Please, as Christy mentioned, look at the report. There is tremendous amount of data. So let's look at some of the brief examples of what we have seen in the NOS data. So when we asked about whether human trafficking is a problem in different locations from the city, nationwide, internationally, almost all mentioned that it's an international problem. 90% of those respondents also mentioned that it's a nationwide problem. And 1/3 of the respondents think that it's actually majority of them about foreign nationals trafficked in their community. When we look at the vulnerability by gender and by types of human trafficking, so almost every respondent believes that actually females are more vulnerable to sex trafficking. But when we look at on the right, there's changes for labor trafficking. For labor trafficking, respondents believe that 3/4 of them mentioned that females and males are vulnerable, so like almost equal vulnerable. When we look at the different type of training areas, when we asked across different topics, different modalities and roles, how to identify human trafficking victims, the first one, and you can see the second one is the human trafficking indicators are across almost all different areas are the most desired topics. And also you can see how to report is also another high requested topic. So when we look at now the reporting, 85% has mentioned that they have never reported any signs of trafficking. Please remember that the respondent pool has different modalities and different roles. So among these, you can see below that, like, for example, aviation, 99% mentioned never reported anything. When we actually went in depth about like what is the reason for this, so we figured out that like there are different concerns regarding misidentifying or even reporting human trafficking. So almost a half mentioned that they have concerns about misidentifying signs of human trafficking, and 1/4 actually mentions that this is preventing them from reporting signs of human trafficking. When we look at the examples, the highest one is embarrassing the passenger or the customer, and the second one is actually the fear of getting sued if one is reporting. And then so when we actually look at the different groups, in those different groups, we see that still most mention that they have never been approached by anybody who is asking for help from escaping an abuser. So as mentioned by Christy, our group also had specific examples and the voice from survivors of labor and sex trafficking. So we can see some of the highlights with regards to transportation. 57% of the survivors mentioned that if they wanted to leave, but they weren't able to because of the transportation exit opportunities. Again, when we look at it, like different types of information, which is going to help them, 65% mentioned that they never seen a hotline information posted anywhere during their exploitation, which is one of the main preventative measures or exit strategies that is used. And what is also more important that 2/3 of them all are mentioning that they are relocated, again, signifying the information of transportation opportunities. When we look at the different types of modalities, I'm sure, especially for transportation, this is one of the most important topics. But again, within the trans country, the most commonly stated modality is transit during all stages of human trafficking, from recruitment to exploitation. And when we look at the input from the service providers, they mentioned that almost half of them had to turn a client due to lack of resources. And then also the 60% of them indicated that it's difficult to obtain transportation services for their clients in their region. Now I will hand it back to Christy to talk about how we can use this for future. Christy, you're muted.
Always like talking to myself. I'm so sorry. As I was mentioned into the thin air there, we had thousands of data points here, and I really encourage you to go. You can download the report, download individual chapters. The data that we've included, even for trainers, some of the data that Kesman just contained, literally, and it helps us transition from an HT 101, a human trafficking 101, specific to each mode of transportation. What are they specifically asking for? How can we transition to a more in-depth level of training so that we're advancing our knowledge so that those frontline workers have greater opportunity to possibly identify a victim of human trafficking and help them exit their abuse. And so as we look here, there were some very specific things that we did throughout the entire study. When I co-founded UAS up until today, we always compensate lived experience experts at the same rate as we do any other subject matter expert. Hands down, if they participate in something we're doing, they are compensated. And I think it's so important, no matter what we're all doing across the board, that we are ensuring that survivors and lived experience experts are being compensated. As we look at where we're going from here, this NOST, this first one is a foundation. It sets a benchmark for where we are. The intention at UAS is to repeat these studies every 3 to 4 years to help measure those benchmarks, as well as seeing where there are changes, especially in different specific titles that may be more exposed to signs of human trafficking. We are passionate about data at UAS, as I know they are here as well, and the importance of educating how can we use data to advance counter-trafficking measures? How can we use updated data to advance those initiatives? So we certainly believe that there is a place for us to go using the data that's been collected. And as we look forward, I know Evelyn, I think you're going to share just on those next steps of your role. And I think we'll have questions at the end that we'll be able to circle back on that. So if you need to contact either myself or Kesman, there's our contact information.
Again, my name is Evelyn Chumbow. I have a new title, Advocacy and Survivor Leadership Director with the Human Trafficking Legal Center, and I am going to share my perspective. It's just a little, not going to be too long. And also, if you have questions, just ask and keep it. I feel like when we talk a lot, I love the data that Keza and Christine just put together. I was really looking at the number and also was a little bit shocked to see like how many people, when it comes to like forced labor, you definitely cannot talk about trafficking / modern day slavery without talking about transportation. Transportation plays a key role to trafficking and making sure that people are informed and understanding, but most importantly, people that work in transportation should definitely be trauma informed. And when we talk a lot about transportation when it comes to trafficking, I feel like sometimes the focus is usually like a commercial truck when it's in the US. We don't talk about like the ships, right? Like boats and things like that. You know, there's so many people that are transported to the seas, you know, that we don't talk about it. And if we also see human trafficking as a form of modern day slavery, you will know that back in slavery, there are a lot of ways people were transported was through boats, through ships. So, so if we are going to address trafficking in transportation, we have to look at all type of transportation. I really appreciate the first presentation because it showed the different sign of transportation, but we really always miss that. We always focus on like commercial trucks or, you know, trains or taxi. We don't talk a lot about planes. We don't talk a lot about boats. We don't talk a lot about, you know, all the type of transportation that a victim of trafficking can be part of. And we really need to really start looking into that. Next slide. And then the title is Say Safeguarding. I really wanted to just highlight it as a survivor, you know, myself of child forced labor. I came through, you know, I got on the plane. You know, a lot of time people ask, how did you get here? You know, I got through the plane, you know, but there was one person that was there that will always take care of me. It's now that, you know, as I'm getting older, like I'm even thinking, okay, maybe I can have my son go somewhere, but I'm still afraid, right? Maybe I can have my son fly to go somewhere, but I did not know that you have to pay for like extra unaccompanied manual, but I don't think that happened to me when I came here. I think when I was told to just give this document to like a flight attendant, and that's what I did. I gave the document to the flight attendant, and not only that, I didn't even know that I came to the United States illegally, right? And you know, I came illegally, and I first arrived in London because we had to switch plane. So when we're talking about transportation, I went from one flight to another flight and just didn't really understand. I met my trafficker in London and she picked me up in London. Then from London, we came to the United States. But when we want to do like safeguarding practice, I really echo for people to be really trauma informed. They really need to be training. They need to get more training. I cannot echo this. And I know other survivors that United Against Slavery have just mentioned, they probably talked about being trauma informed because, you know, we still meet and interact with people that we are victims at that time, or even as survivors that they just don't know how to handle the situation because they're not trauma informed. We really have to be trauma informed, especially in this time of like the political climate that we are in. It is so important. You know, as a survivor myself and from another country, these are difficult times, right? I worried like, hey, if I go here, would they say this? Would they do that? So it would be good for people that are working in those transportation to really obtain training, but definitely understand all type of trafficking. I am so proud that we have come a long way of advocating on sex and labor, but it's still a long way when it comes to forced labor. It's still difficult. It is still hard. And you know why? Because so many of us, most people that are trafficked into forced labor are mostly foreign, but not a lot. There are US citizens that are also victims of labor trafficking, but we can say majority are foreigners, right? And that's why we don't get to see them a lot, or even if they're on a train going to another state to work in another farm. Or even, you know, I don't know if you guys saw the incident that last year that happened in Baltimore, where I'm from, you know, in Baltimore, where the bridge collapsed. You know, who were the people that were working there, right? And that was in the ship, that was the boat, it collapsed. We have to really start focusing on labor trafficking as well. And we have to dig deep. We really have to dig deep in this. And safety precaution and resources for workers, right? Because we are forced to work. And there are also you know, people in the airport that are, you know, I think one airport that I went to that I was so impressed, I think it's really funny that it was actually Florida, right? For a lot of them, because I was so impressed by how they had this sign and they show like the form of trafficking, they put labor, and then they put sex trafficking, but they really show the type of labor trafficking. I was like, wow, this is good, and they also did like the resources. I was like, wow, we have come a long way in that, but we still need to go far. And I think we mentioned the last presentation mentioned including diverse voices in prevention. I really appreciate that. We really have to. I know, with everything going on in our world right now, but we still have to include the diversity in voices when we talk about trafficking. I don't care what it is, we have to really do that. I don't care what background, we have to set our feelings aside. Like I didn't ask to come here. My only dream for coming to this country was to marry Will Smith. It's still the dream, but I still might get the chance, but who knows, right? But that was it. I just saw, the television show, but I didn't ask to be here at age 9, right? I was forced into the country. I was forced to cook and clean. So are so many foreigners that are forced into this country without the knowledge, and they are transported into this country without their knowledge and fake promises. So if we are going to talk about it, let's include all the voices. Let's look at who is impacted, and let's not say, oh, let's just focus on one type of race. It's so unfair. And I think I just echo this again, looking at all type of transportation. We cannot talk about transportation without talking about school buses. We cannot talking about ships, airplane, train, cars, all kind of things, right? And we really need to, for the transportation folks, we really need to really start also talking about ships, right? We have to. There's so many migrants that are coming by in ships that are being brought here, and they're forced to work, and they're crossing. How do you guys think they're crossing over? How did they get here? It's not by plane. It's not by a school bus. So why are we not looking into the shipping business as well? Prevention for me, education for all of you that are here learning, and for the folks that put this together, MTI, bravo to you guys, because we're educating ourselves. This is my second time presenting with MTI, and I'm so grateful for that. Education is so important, training and learning, because there's two people that I talk about, oh, this happened, they're like so shocked, like, hey, really? But it does. So keep having more education on this and having more training, especially for the folks that are working in transportation. They need to train how to be trauma informed. And policies. Policies is so important. Policies that support trafficking survivors. For transportation, I think the U.S. Department of Transportation needs to really start advocating for trafficking survivors more, in particularly for the ones that need to reunite with their family. Transportation can make a big difference in supporting survivors that are from another country that, have been here. I'm just going to use myself as an example, not being able to see my family for 18 years. And I wish I had some sort of funding, some sort of support to fly back home to reunite with my family. But I had to do that on my own. And we need to have better policies that are really helping trafficking survivors, and better policies that really include the transportation department, because you play a major role. And lastly, investing in survivors. Kristen say it, make sure you pay them, right? Make sure you pay them, and also paying them. And transportation can also do a major thing, right? Not only work on policies, not only training, but hiring survivors that want to be in transportation, hiring survivors that, it's like, you know what, I got my driver license. Can I get a job here? Because having someone in that space, you don't know what they can help you. They can be able to identify trafficking survivors. If their passion is flying a plane, maybe invest in them to fly a plane. Driving a school bus, invest in them to drive a school bus and do so. So there's so much that the transportation can do. And with that, I just want to conclude when it comes to investment. Last year, with the support of the Human Trafficking Legal Center, we launched a fellowship called the Harriet Tubman Fellowship to help survivors of forced labor. We launched the program last year and we had 84 applicants. And out of the 85, we picked 7 survivors. And each of those 7 survivors are in the school of their choice or certificate of point. So the program is we give them $10,000 for each year. It's a 2-year program. But not only that, we also provide mentoring, monthly guest speaking, and advocacy week in DC. And in that advocacy week, they come and we train them, because leaders build leaders. The whole point of the fellowship, if you want to invite a survivor to speak, let's prepare them. We want them to win. We don't want them to fail. You don't want them to only come share their voice. But when I also say investing in them, asking them what they really want to do, right? So these fellows, they say, hey, I want to be a paralegal. So we paid for the paralegal course. And not only that, we also give them a $500 monthly stipend just to support their whatever need they need. So when we say investing, we need to have more programs like Harriet Tubman that is investing in survivors, supporting the growth of survivors, because especially now in our political climate, we need more programs like Harriet Tubman that are investing in survivors, because this is a crucial time and we need to create more leaders. And with that, I will leave it for question and you can follow us. And now I know how to stop sharing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for your, hard part on actually leading this topic. So, I mean, we really appreciate it, all your insight from your own backgrounds and your expertise. So right now we are going to take the questions we only have like 10 minutes or so left. So I will just first use the first question. So this is for you and I, Christy. What are the biggest challenges in using data and analytics to track or prevent human trafficking? Do you want to go first, Christy?
I'll just answer real quick. We all know the importance, how critical data is for fighting cancer, for new drugs to battle certain things. What we've not adapted yet is the importance in data in counter-trafficking work. We rely on law enforcement data for tracking case studies. But we have got to have a greater understanding, and that really falls on us, those that are collecting data, new data, to educate those on the importance of using data. So what do I think are the biggest hurdles? Well, the same hurdles that we've had. And I'm sure others that have had that are collecting data. It's first educating on the importance of using data. Guys, for those of us that have been in this movement forever, we're still using data, quoting data that was collected 10, 15 years ago, and we're quoting it as if it's relevant today, like it's the same thing today. Things have transitioned. Evelyn is absolutely correct. We have evolved in our counter-trafficking work, but we have not evolved in using updated data. But we've also needed newer data, functional data, relevant data to what we're doing today, not just 20 years ago. So I think that would be my initial response on that. Kesvin, did you want to add to it?
Yes, definitely. I think as a business analytics professor, if you don't have the data, you cannot work. Basically, that's the baseline of it. And I think in addition to that, basically, I think when we are pushing for data, I really want to make sure that we're actually pushing for useful, correct, especially like when we talk about, for example, from the transportation, what should be collected meaningfully. So I'm actually very grateful that I will be working on a project with the support of MTI and SB1, like to actually collect human trafficking data. So I really want to make sure that we are trying to increase those opportunities, as you mentioned, as Evelyn mentioned. So I think that will be my initial comment on it.
I would add one last quick thing to that for everyone, because I know we're short on time. If you'll go to our website, you'll see the manual, you'll see our study here. As Evelyn mentioned, we have an entire chapter just on forced labor. Kesvin actually led that chapter. It is all about forced labor. Throughout every single chapter that we have, I really encourage you to read the survivor chapter, which breaks down so much of how transportation's used, how they sex and labor, how individually they were transported to sporting events, how they were, what transportation, including Evelyn, maritime, not just maritime. We literally break it down into all the different types, boats, fishing boats, ships, all breaking it down, survivor data that says as a labor trafficking, as a sex trafficking, as a I was trafficked for both. This is how transportation was used in all of those aspects during recruitment, during the exploitation, during the escape, during the transitional time period. So it's enough for us to say, hey, we've collected data, but then we've actually got to use the data. And so I encourage everyone, just go look. We've broken the chapters down. You don't have to read all 600 plus pages of the NOST report because it is lengthy, but I broke it down specific. If you want forced labor data, it's there. If you want data on training, it's there. If you want survivor data, it's there. So I'll just add that. So one of the challenges to whoever asked that is we got to collect good data. It's got to be resourceful. It's got to be quality data, but then we've got to get it into the hands of people. And so that's what I would encourage today is actually look at the data. There is a lot of new data that has not been collected in a long time. Some of it's adding to what Polaris has done, but we have a lot of new data that's never been collected before across all of those groups, including from survivors and lived experience experts.
In addition to that, also supply chains. We also have in the forced labor piece of that supply chains there. Okay, thank you so much, Christy. So Evelyn, this question is for you. Based on your experience, what do survivors need most from the transportation industry?
Thank you. What they need most, really, right now, like I said, we need to be trauma informed, and the number one they need is safety, right? What they need more is safety, knowing that they will be safe if they do come. And the reason why I echo the safety part, especially now, we do have survivors that do want to travel, right? But they're afraid to travel because they don't know if they will be safe to travel or they will be taken into eyes, especially the ones that are still having their cases trying to figure out their situations, right? So I would say they need safety and they need to be able to trust that the transportation folks that work in transportation can guarantee their safety. For me, with the political climate, I would say that would be number one. It's just making sure that they're safe and that they can trust you to open up about the situation they're going through.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm looking at the questions also at the same time. We have actually a question from a bus driver. What are the some factors to consider, so such as signs of human trafficking?
That's a good one. I would say really also getting that training and education is really good that the bus driver is here taking this class. I would say for me, when in my situation, because I'm a survivor of child forced labor as a domestic servitude, right? The bus used to come and pick up the kids that I used to take care of. Maybe that bus driver, if they recognize or kind of see that, okay, why is this little girl always standing in the bus stop to drop off these kids? Why she herself is not going to school, right? And not only that, I've met other survivors that were going to school, that they were taking the bus to go to school, but they were being forced to work in the home. So one of the signs is really paying attention to the signs by just looking. And also sometimes you got to use your gut feeling. We're not saying be like Liam Nelson. I do love me Liam Nelson, take it, but really get the training, right? Understand and really be able to identify the signs, right? For me, it would have been as a kid myself, if that bus driver saw me, they could have seen that I was very exhausted, right? And the fact that I am always standing there holding those two kids without a smile on my face, right? Without even and it's always, and then also wearing the same clothes all the time, right? Those are other signs, right? As a bus driver, always wearing the same clothes. And if they are students that are taking the bus, you can also just kind of see from their face, because I know a survivor that was taking a bus and the bus driver did not recognize it because they didn't know the site. And as bus driver, you guys are rushing because you have to go to the next stop to pick up the next kids.
Thank you so much. We have a question specifically about addressing demand. How are we using data to address the demand side of human trafficking and finding the root causes for demand? And where can we find data on demand side? Christy, do you have a specific part on this? Or the demand
So
side?
I know we haven't did a lot of data. We haven't did any data on the demand side. We've been very specific on frontline workers. That's what we focus on at United Against Slavery, is those actually doing the work on the front lines: law enforcement, service providers, lived experience experts, transportation, healthcare, judicial, things like that. So I know our focus of data that we collect is not on the demand side, but I know that there are several organizations out there that do focus. And again, my apology that I it's not coming to my head right now, but if you will do a search for demand data, anti-trafficking data, you should be able to pull that up for that and have actual applications that you can implement locally in your communities or refer to others. But you are exactly right. It's, in looking at sex and labor trafficking, because there's still a demand. We can't just subset, okay, the only demand that exists is within sex trafficking. That's so, there's more labor trafficking survivors in the world, victims in the world, than there are sex trafficking. It's just a reality. And many labor trafficking victims have been sex trafficked and vice versa. And so when we look at the demand, it's not just sex trafficking. It's why do we even allow companies to be in a place to where they can exploit children, adults, for forced labor and labor trafficking? So I'm sorry I don't have more specific recommendations on that, but that's how I would go to try to find more details.
In my experience, it's similar. Actually, I have worked with organizations with this also in different states and also internationally, but it was majority of it was actually not necessarily nationwide. It was more, interest by a local community to attempt that, including, for example, Chicago. Chicago actually Cook County specifically is very well known for, trying to attempt demand side of human trafficking for both sex and labor. And so like the same with LA area. Again, it's more region specific efforts that I know, not necessarily like, very much broader efforts. With that, I'm going to actually leave the floor to Dr. Nixon. So thank you so much, Evelyn and Christy, for taking the questions with me.
Yes, thank you all so very much. I really appreciate it. I can tell from the discussion we could have gone on forever, but we have to be respectful to all of you who have given up your time to attend our webinar. One last note before we go, please do join us on May 6th for another MTI event, Reclaiming the Right to Walk, Learning from a Century of Pedestrian Advocacy. Historian Peter Norton and Vision Zero Network Executive Director Leah Sham will share how the history of the movement for pedestrian rights can inform current policy and advocacy efforts. We'll drop the link into the chat. We thank you all. For the participant who asked about volunteering to help analyze data, why don't you send an email over to us at MTI? Tell us a little bit about what your background is. Maybe we can connect you with a researcher such as Kesban or Christy to see if your services and expert knowledge can be of help.